Hello, and welcome to the Paranormal Paradigm podcast with your hosts, Kieran.
And Ben.
Today, we're going to be having an interview with Susan Plunket. Now, Susan Plunket is a writer and psychologist in private practice in New York City. She received her doctorate at the New School for Social Research in 1989. She's written a new book called Mission from Venus, which pushes further into the fantasy worlds of the fifth and sixth dimensions, where ETs are preparing to incarnate on Earth to help save the planet. She lives with her family in the Greenwich Village, but unfortunately, still in the third dimension. So, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, this is a new one for us.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. when we were going to make this podcast, I'd never in a million years thought we'd be talking to someone whose topic includes what sex is like in the fifth dimension.
I mean, I didn't even know there were five dimensions.
Yep. So, well, I mean, what more can we say? Just on with the interview, and we hope you enjoy it. And hello to Susan. How are you doing?
Great. Nice to be talking to you.
Thank you for coming on. I know this is going to be a fantastic discussion, a fantastic talk. It's certainly one that's going into the realms of places that we didn't think we could go as a show. It's not something we thought we'd be talking about, but here we are, and we're thoroughly looking forward to it. So if you can just give us a little bit of information about yourself, kind of your background and what got you to where you are now.
Okay. Well, I'm a clinical psychologist in private practice in New York City, and I have been for the last 30 years. And I wasn't a writer until very recently. Well, maybe the last 5 years I've been writing, and I was directed to write. And at first I was very resistant. I thought, I can't write. I have a daughter to raise. I have a dog. I have two cats. I have a full-time private practice. I'm Dr. Susan Plunket. How can I find time for the writing? But it was nagging at me that more than one intuitive had been telling me this since 2011. In fact, in 2011, one of them told me that I was a channel, and that I was not happy to hear at the time. I was frightened by it. I was like, well, what could be coming through me if I'm a channel? I mean, wow. I don't know who's going to try to come through. So I was not very open to it. And then a lot of things happened in my life that were kind of turning the world upside down. In fact, I even had a dream where I was standing on a platform in deep space and I could see the Earth far away from me, like that NASA photo with the blue and white. And suddenly in the dream, it flipped upside down. And I realized, being trained as a Jungian psychologist, that my world was going to turn upside down and my dream was warning me. And in short order, my husband left, my daughter had a kind of a breakdown, and my father died, and my sister died suddenly. So my world did turn upside down. And then I decided, okay, I'm just going to open this channel because I've always believed that everything that happens to you in your life is a catalyst and is trying to get you to move further down the path toward enlightenment. So it was at that point that I said, okay, I'm going to write. I'm just going to sit down at the computer and see what comes out. And I wrote my first book, which wasn't science fiction. It was more a psychological book. But I think it was me teaching myself how to write. And then when that book was done, I just sat down at the computer and I heard in my head, you're supposed to write a science fiction trilogy and we will download it to you. And write in the morning, because sometimes the downloads will happen while you're sleeping. So that was 2016. And I've been writing every morning for most every morning since then. I get up, I go to the park for an hour with our Labrador retriever, then I come home, check emails and stuff, then sit down at the computer and just write what comes through my head. Um,
So
which isn't
when you talk about this channeling, and you get it while you're asleep, and these downloadings, can they come in dreams? So are you aware that this download is happening at the time, or are you not aware of anything really until you sit in front of the computer and it just kind of comes out?
I'm not aware of it. It doesn't come through my dreams. My dreams give me information from my own unconscious and the collective unconscious, but the downloads I get at night, I realize them when I sit at the computer. But also, as I'm sitting there, sometimes something drops into my head. And this was a feeling that I had known actually for the past 30 years as a clinical psychologist, because sometimes when I was sitting with a client, something would just drop down as like dropped from heaven unasked. Like, and I knew that I was supposed to tell the client this thing or make this interpretation. I mean, many times I was just working as a regular psychologist, but it was a different feeling when something dropped into my head. So when I'm writing, I'm often aware of beings, like light beings, to the right and left of my shoulder, like almost like ovals of light, uh, not humanoid, just ovals of light communicating with me. And sometimes there are conflicting messages. And one intuitive told me, your problem will be to like sort out the messages, because there's so many beings that want to help Earth at this point and want to help humans and want humans to get the message, which is the key message of Mission from Venus, that we are all one. We are all divine. We are all capable of miracles. And we are all loved beyond measure. And this self hatred that so many of us feel, and competition and envy and jealousy, is just the path of the dark side. And that is when we realize how much we are loved and how we all are one, that goes away. So that's really the message. But they told me to tell it in story form, because nobody just wants to read a blah, 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 blah self help book. But people are open to story. They said, you're really telling in this trilogy, because they told me it would be a trilogy. And now the first book is out. The second book has just gone to John Hunt Publishing. And the third book, I have not, I don't even know the title yet. They haven't even told me that. I just know the opening scene, which they downloaded. And then mercifully, because of, you know, promoting the first book and doing talks like this, I haven't had much time to write. So thank God the downloads aren't backing up and crashing my inner hardware.
So would you say there's like a battle taking place almost between dimensional beings?
Yeah, between the light and the dark. Primarily in our part of the galaxy, it's the Dark Lords of Orion versus the light beings who come from many galaxies to help Earth. Earth is the focus of a lot of attention right now, and there are, I've been told, about 70 million wanderers, that is, ETs, incarnate in human form now. I mean, the three of us could be wanderers from a higher dimension, because everybody who comes to Earth has to pass through the veil of forgetting. And so we don't know where we came from and where we were before.
So if Earth is the focus of these beings' attention, how come? What is it that's so important about Earth that's to these guys?
Yeah, good question. Because Earth was set up, according to what I've been told, as an experiment to see if pure light, pure sparks of spirit incarnate in flesh could find their way back to source, back to the divine, without help or without interference. And Earth itself as a planet is about to jump in consciousness, or is already moving actually, from the third dimension into the fourth dimension. And all the beings that live on Earth, the surface dwellers, us, we have to make the jump to the fourth dimension too. So others in the universe want to help us to make sure as many people as possible can make that jump and go on Earth, because third dimensional beings cannot survive the light on a fourth dimensional planet because they can't hold enough light. So if you don't make the jump, if you are not holding enough light, if you are not loving enough, you won't be able to reincarnate here anymore. You'll have to go to another planet, which is still third dimension, because it will match your vibration. But if you do contact that spark of love, divine love within you, and you move to the fourth dimension and you hold enough violet light, then you can incarnate. You'll have the choice to incarnate here or wherever else you might want that's fourth dimensional. So because we're right on the cusp of the leap, that's why there's so much focus here now.
So if we, and this is a question that I've always wondered, and I think this is probably the best opportunity I've ever had to ask, if our, I guess, consciousness or whatever it is that occupies us, if we're choosing to reincarnate onto this planet and we have a choice over where we can go, then why do certain people incarnate as a starving African child, for example, or incarnate as a sexual abuse victim or something like that? Why would they choose to reincarnate and experience that life?
Because when we're in between lives, life between life, after we leave one body, one vehicle, we're in our spirit form. We don't remember exactly what it is like to be human and how difficult it is to be human, because we're much freer in our spirit form, and we understand in that form as we're in direct contact with our higher self, that the way we travel up the dimensions is through the use of catalysts. And catalysts are challenging things that happen to us. So we plan our next life when we're in between lives. So if we say, I want to do a lot of growth in my next life, I don't want a silver spoon life, I'm going to just take a plateful. If I can wake up, then I won't have this catalyst. If I can't wake up, please, higher self, give me another catalyst. Here's an example. It became clear to me that there was one president of the U.S. called FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, and his wife Eleanor Roosevelt, who did great things for the masses of humanity. And Franklin Roosevelt got polio, and I believe he was a wanderer. And he came into this, and so was his wife, who I believe was his teacher, into this dimension to do good for humanity. And he did do tremendous good. But he also fell prey to a lot of sexual addictions. And I think that he set up, if I do fall prey to things that are off my path, give me a catalyst. And he got the catalyst of polio, which made his life very difficult. But he still soldiered on despite that. So if you stay to your path, I don't think you get as many catalysts. Unless you from the get-go said, okay, pile, starvation on my plate, pile victimhood on my plate. I want to overcome victimhood in this lifetime. I had an experience with a family member like that. My sister had my younger sister, a really amazing life, a wonderful husband, 2 daughters, and she was really happy in her life. And suddenly she got bladder cancer, and she was walking around at Easter, and she was dead July 1st. She woke up on the morning of July 1st, and she said to her husband, I'm leaving now. I mean, she knew she had cancer. And she died. And so I said to my guides, why did that happen? She was so happy. And she was such a giving person. She was such a healer. And they said, your sister chose to work on attachment. So she had to be so happy and so in love with her life in order for it to be a real test of attachment and to leave. And she passed her test. She wasn't bitter or resentful. She was 60 pounds when she died. The cancer was so ravaging. And her husband must have gotten a lesson too, because the last week of her life, I was standing with him outside their house. They had a beautiful house on a hillside surrounded by wildflowers. He said, "Susan, I'm madly in love with your sister." And we both knew she was dying any minute. So, yeah, she took a cancer and she died. But in the long run, she will see her daughters again, her husband again. And I visited her after she died because I found a psychologist who did not past life regression, but life between life regression, where you go to your last death and then you follow the trail over to the other side. And you're in between lives and you can contact people. It takes about 8 hours because they put you in a deep trance and then they tape it. And believe me, you don't want to talk onto the tape because you're so engaged with it. There's no talking on the other side. Everything is mental telepathy. And so you're just in it. And the psychologist kept saying to me, "What are you seeing? What are you seeing? What's being said?" And I was like, "Oh, don't bother me, don't bother me." But I wouldn't have had a record if I didn't manage to say some things, because it was all mental. And at one point he said, "Look down and tell me what you look like." And I said, "Oh, I'm an oval of light. I have no other form but oval." And then he said, "What's your name?" And I said, without missing a beat, a word I had never heard in my life, Sonam. And I use that as one of the characters in the book, as a name.
So that's I guess the name of the being that is
Eternal.
Yeah. So while you're experiencing this reality, you are Susan, but ultimately, at the bottom of it all, you are this other being.
Sonam, yeah. One morning I woke up, this was about 20 years ago, and I said to my husband, "What's my name here in this dimension? I just totally can't remember. I know that I'm living in this dimension now, but I have no idea." He said, "Your name is Susan Plunket, and you're married to me." And then once he told me, I said, "Oh, yeah, that's my name." But I just couldn't remember it. And sometimes I dream of people, and I know their name in the dream, and it's different than the name they have in reality. And when I wake up, I cannot remember their name in the third dimension.
That's interesting.
Okay.
So you've spoke of a cataclysm happening on another planet in our solar system. So what do you think happened to those people?
Oh, Maldek? When Maldek exploded and became that asteroid belt between Jupiter and Mars?
Yeah.
Well, what I've been told happened was that because they blew up their planet and themselves in a nuclear war 700,000 years ago, they had karmic retribution from the Council of Nine in charge of this part of the solar system. And for 200,000 years, they were in such a tight knot from the explosion that no one could reach them. But after about 2,000 years, different higher beings were able to reach them and brought them, because Maldek had been a high third dimensional planet, those souls were third dimensional. So they needed a third dimensional home in order to continue their incarnations. But because they had blown up their planet, they weren't allowed to incarnate in human bodies. They were placed inside the earth in Bigfoot type bodies, and they had to go back then to higher second dimensional, lower third dimensional, and work their way up. Apparently, most of them now, after 500,000 years of incarnating on earth, work their way up to human form and past human form, and are, some of them, most of them maybe, I don't know how many are still here, but many of them are now on a fourth dimensional planet. But for a time being, they were here, and there were sightings of them, and that may explain some of the Bigfoot stuff that Gav, is so into.
So with Bigfoot, I mean, one of my big theories is that both myself and Ben, we're paranormal investigators, and we have a theory that everything in this world is operating on particular frequencies, and we believe that Bigfoot and even aliens and other paranormal phenomena are we're all kind of coexisting in the same world, just operating on different frequencies, and
Yes.
that would make aliens not interplanetary but interdimensional, and it would mean that Bigfoot, is existing around us. We just can't see it because he's not vibrating on the frequency that our biological human bodies can. So
that's right. I agree with that.
Yeah, and I agree with what kind of what you just about how these entities are dimensional. They are and they do come from different dimensions, and I think that's why we can't see them as often as we would like to. So it's very interesting. I mean, if they inhabited a Bigfoot type creature, what other creatures did they inhabit, and what do they look like?
The ones that came from Maldek?
Yeah, I mean, well, not only those, but these dimensional beings that you talk of, that are inhabiting our bodies, I guess.
Those whereas Bigfoot now had to come in what's considered, a lower life form vibrating at a heavier vibrational rate. And of course, what you say is true, because everything, if there is no time, then everything would be piled up on each other if it wasn't vibrating in different vibrations. For example, we see Venus in the third dimension with a surface temperature of 800 degrees Fahrenheit and an atmosphere of carbon dioxide and sulfuric acid cloud deck. But the book is set in Venus of the fifth dimension, which is simultaneously existing with Venus in every dimension. And that can only be because of the vibration is different, because there's no time. But we humans agree to time because we would be freaked out and overwhelmed if it would blow our gaskets if we had to see everything happening at once and we didn't understand that it's piled up, but it's in a different vibration, and that's how it keeps separate. So the beings that and this is how the book opens, with a description of a call has gone out across the universe at the beginning of Mission from Venus, that planet Earth needs help. The world's in need of love today, as Stevie Wonder sings. And so the call goes out across the universe, and beings from all over the galaxies respond and come to Venus to be trained to incarnate as a human infant. So when they first arrive in Venus, some are bipedal, tripedal, quadrupedal. Some have sensors, some have scales, some have fur, some have skin. Many don't have eyes or heads. They're all different. But as they begin their training, the light masters ask them to assume a bipedal form with 2 other appendages and then 5 digits on each appendage, and a type of head with eyes, so that they can get accustomed to the heavy chemical body, the electrochemical vehicle, the human vehicle that they will inhabit when they are born on Earth. And they have to then take their higher dimensional consciousness when they are born and stuff it into the body of an infant, which is not really fun for them, but they make that sacrifice because they have to go back to the third dimension, and then their job is to wake up in the body of a human as it starts to grow into a child and an adult, and realize that they are travelers. They are wanderers from a higher dimension, like Tesla, like Jesus, like Buddha, Ben Franklin. Millions of wanderers have come over time to help. So when they come here, they look human. Like, you could be a wanderer because you're paranormal investigators. You could both be and maybe you are wanderers because you want to bring information about other dimensions to all of us to help us understand we are not alone in the universe. We are not the only intelligent beings, and we are all evolving.
So if Two questions. If the people on Earth, if there are wanderers on Earth, are there people that are existing on Earth that are just biological humans and have no kind of, I guess, du- um, uh, of a dimensional being operating inside them? They're just a biological human. Is that happening now? And
Yeah,
also, how do the people that are wanderers, how do they get to know that they are wanderers? How can they tell?
that's a good question. Yes, there are regular humans, but every human is not just a human. Every human is an eternal being with the spark of the divinity and has been in many other forms, probably in many other galaxies. And right now they're choosing to incarnate on Earth in order to have a third dimensional experience for their growth. What's different about the wanderers is that they're not third dimensional. They're high fourth and fifth dimensional, and they choose voluntarily to wander back to the third dimension and then face the task of waking up in this dimension. They know from childhood that there's something different about them, and then they are interested in things like the paranormal, like UFOs, like consciousness, like asking. I remember when I was in first grade, I said to my first grade teacher, um, what are we doing here? How did we get here? What is the point of all this? I mean, why did we come here to this planet? And unfortunately, she said, "Aren't you Christian? Don't you know?" I was, and then she called my parents in for a conference and said, your daughter's asking weird questions.
How dare you?
And I never forgot that I was trying to ask her, like, what is going on here on Earth? You know, so I think you're asking stuff like that. You're investigating the paranormal because what you see is not the whole story. And so wanderers, if there are 70 million wanderers around, they're awake to various degrees, probably some fully awake, probably some suspecting that they're not of this time and place, and some on the verge of waking up. And I think if you call out for help, you will get information, whether through your dreams or through intuition, or a book will fall off a shelf in a bookstore. I think anybody who buys Mission from Venus, who's not already my friend, is probably a wanderer, because many people would not be interested in this if they weren't suspicious that maybe they had come from a different dimension.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm sure your book is, I hope it's doing well. I mean, it certainly looks interesting. So, Mission from Venus is the book by Susan. It's available on Amazon, I guess. It's available.
Yeah, and barnesandnoble.com, and I don't know, wherever John Hunt else has put it.
Yeah, so please, listeners, go out and buy this book. It's by all accounts, it's a fantastic book. Yeah.
Says the author.
I was just wondering, like you were saying about like people waking up to this sort of thing. Do you think that with the current state of what the world's going through with politics in the US and politics in the UK and Europe, do you think more and more people are starting to wake up to this sort of thing?
I think exactly they are, and I think politics is very spiritual. If there's a battle between dark and light, which I believe there is, it goes along the lines of the light side being in service to others, wanting everyone to be covered, wanting everyone to be safe, wanting everybody to be free from want and fear. That's the light side. The dark side wants to enslave as many people, deprive as many people, and take power over as many people as possible. And this loosely breaks down to the two different parties in the United States, and possibly in the UK as well. You have factions that want to keep people out and separate people and deny people, as we do here. it's very polarized right now in the world. Well, it's certainly in our two countries, and I think it divides along consciousness. People who are more consciousness, who have more consciousness, want everybody to have health care, want everybody to have food, want everybody to be welcome. People who are fearful and negative and want to control, want to build walls and keep people out and put them in cages and starve them, and abuse them and enslave them. And that is the path of the dark side, because you progress on the dark side by taking power over others. You progress on the light side by service to others, whether the service is information like your recordings, or the service is medical care, or the service is kindness, whatever the service is. That's the way you advance on the path of light. And enslaving and caging and torturing and depriving and keeping out is the way you advance on the dark side.
I think if you were to look at it, at face value, and if you were to say, right, that's dark, that's light, who's winning? I think to most people it would very much look like dark is winning.
At the moment. The moment.
With the millions and millions of people that are in poverty. I mean, the UK, we have so many homeless people in the UK. We have full-time workers who are having to go to food banks because they can't afford to feed their families. You only have to turn the news on to be bombarded with, fear. And it certainly seems like darkness is winning. Now, obviously, yourself, you have a little bit more knowledge. You can go a little bit deeper. Is that the case? And if it is, for how much longer until I guess the side of the light actually overcomes the dark?
I think it does appear that the dark side is on the rise and on the up and up, but it is just hatching out. There have been far darker times on our planet than there are now, but it's all hatched out. It's all on social media. It's all on the news. We know of it all now, and it's hatching out to be healed. But I think the light side will be transcendent and victorious. I think it has already been decided that Earth will go to the list of planets on the light side. It will not join the Dark Lords of Orion on the dark side. The people who insist on subjugating and causing suffering to others will not incarnate here again after this lifetime. I believe and have been told that within a few hundred years there will be paradise on Earth. We will not be overcome with global warming. The light will have this victory. And right now the planet is on fire. Venice is 50 feet underwater. People are starving, disease is rampant, children are in cages in the United States, in cages. And so, yes, it looks terrible, but it's just hatching out to be healed. Because we do have light workers, you two among them, bringing consciousness to people.
I mean, an interesting question I've just thought of, and I'm kind of thinking out loud. If you often hear of, I mean, for me, I would class that there are certain people that are on the dark side who we know are in existence, and some of these people they try to prolong their life, and they always seem to live to quite an old age, and they have multiple heart transplants, multiple operations, so they can live as long as possible.
Right.
Is it possible that they're doing that because they know that when they do die, when the biological vessel does die, they will not be welcome back here?
Probably they do know, because they have access to information and power and money. And, they're across all countries, this certain group of whatever, Illuminati or whatever name you want to call them by. They have tremendous power and knowledge, but they are losing. They will lose. Don't give up.
Yeah.
I mean, slightly, well, it's not off topic, but it's off topic to what we were just talking about. One of the big things that both me and Ben have been dead excited to talk to you about is sex in the fifth dimension. Now,
Ah.
That's two relatively young guys. I say young. We were born the year you became a doctorate. So
Oh, 1989.
yeah, we're both born in 1989. So we're relatively young, although we don't feel it. Sex in the fifth dimension. So do you want to just tell us about that? And I know Ben's keen to take notes here.
Sure. Well, first of all, I will tell you that sex in both the third dimension and the fifth dimension was intended by the divine to be a joyous energy exchange between the masculine and the feminine, even if the masculine and the feminine are in two same-sex bodies. There's still a masculine energy and a feminine energy. And the intention is for the masculine or the male to transfer his strength and physical energy to the female, while she transfers her emotional and spiritual energy to inspire the male. Because the female can become brittle and stagnant if she doesn't have the fire of the male. Similarly, the male can become irritable and angry if he doesn't have the creative inspiration of the feminine, the muse, as it was. And orgasm is the point of transfer. In the fifth dimension, sex is conducted in a slightly different way. Because they have light bodies, they are still having an exchange, but it is conducted through the breath. The way you breathe determines the dimension from which the energy you receive comes. So if you're breathing in a particular fifth dimensional way, it can carry you right up to contact with the divine, right up through all the chakras, intrinsic and extrinsic, to contact with intelligent infinity, so that you are resting in a state of cosmic orgasm, the same as what the universe rests in. So instead of an orgasm being just seconds, as it is in the third dimension, you can achieve a state where you're resting in orgasm, because that is the state of the universe. So in the fifth dimension, it's a prolonged orgasm achieved through channeling light energy. And some of this can happen in the third dimension by breathing in a certain way. And I think that tantric sex teaches certain kinds of breathing, which help to sustain orgasm and make it a full body orgasm. But the main difference between sex in the third and the fifth, yes, it's an energy exchange, but in the third dimension, we don't always achieve contact with the divine, or not necessarily sustained contact. We do have that period of ecstatic bliss in orgasm where the two energies exchange and heal. Sex is the single most healing thing for the human body. So it was good to have sex frequently in the context of caring, not just a different partner every night, unless you truly do care for each partner. But sex is a very healing thing in both dimensions.
So, I mean, what you've just said there is that having, I guess, one night stands or having affairs or, sleeping with, if you've got a partner, sleeping with other people, it's not as pure of an energy, as pure as a moment as doing it with the one that you are truly connected with.
Yeah, it's better if you're truly connected. But the divine doesn't judge anything. Those things called the Ten Commandments, that is bullshit. No divine on the path of light would transgress on a human's free will. No true God will say, "Thou shalt not." There may be guidelines, but that's how the dark side works. They take what is a good guideline, like, yes, sex is probably more fulfilling and there's more light exchange with someone you love. But to say, "Thou shalt not this, thou shalt not that," no. The divine doesn't say that. So the dark side will take good points, like, yeah, it's better not to sleep with your friend's wife, or better not to kill someone, because these things create karma and attachment to this, to more lives. But this thing of I shall not, that is the dark side instilling guilt and fear. That's how they work. They enslave you through fear. They create fear and guilt and shame and enslave us. There is nothing to be ashamed of.
Okay.
So what would be your interpretation of like soulmates, for example, like two energies that are perfect for each other?
I think there's soulmates, and then there are twin flames. Twin flames are, in my understanding, one spark when it flies out from source at the moment of begins, if there is no beginning and no end, but at the moment that spark separates from divinity, splits into two, a masculine energy and a feminine energy, and travels through their development. And when those twin flames meet in one particular incarnation, say on Earth, they meet, that's a twin flame reunion. And that person, that other person who carries the other half of your spark, is like no other person to you. Soulmates, we travel and incarnate often in groups with the same soul group, and we feel very familiar. We meet someone in our soul group and we feel like, God, I feel like I know you, because they're one of our soul group. They're in our soulmate group. Like one lifetime, if you have several lifetimes on Earth, you may go to other planets or other dimensions, but say you incarnating on Earth for a few hundred lifetimes. One time you're the daughter, one time you're the father, one time you're the cousin, one time you're the boyfriend, one time you're the lover, one time you're the uncle. You switch, but you travel with this group, learning your lessons and evolving. And that's the soulmate group. But the twin flame group, which is what Mission from Venus talks about, because we follow twin flame pairs in this book, and they have to separate. When they leave Venus, they have to separate and incarnate separately and find one another again on Earth when they wake up, in order to have their twin flame reunion. And it's a big sacrifice for them to leave Venus and separate and go into the bodies of babies, and only hope that they can wake up in the third dimension.
So when you talk about how these beings come from Venus, are there beings on any other planet in our system? Like are there on Mars or Jupiter?
Not in the third dimension.
No.
Not in the third dimension, but in all of these planets in higher dimensions there are beings. Just like there are many, many beings on Venus now in the sixth dimension, but no beings on Venus in the third dimension.
Okay. So when we talk about, just so for our listeners, but mainly for me, so we can get a better understanding of what dimensions are. So obviously we exist in the third dimension, and then how does it change as we go into the fourth? So what might the fourth be like? What might the fifth be like? And then of course you've just mentioned the sixth. So what is the difference between each one? And
right. There is more power. The being holds more and more light each dimension that you go up. And a fourth dimensional being can be a fourth dimensional positive being or fourth dimensional negative. Fifth dimension can be fifth dimensional positive or fifth dimensional negative. Sixth dimension, fifth dimensional positive, sixth dimensional negative. But at the seventh dimension, there is no way forward except if the negatives make the jump to the positive, then everything forward has to be on the positive path. So for example, the fifth dimensional beings that I'm writing about who are training on Venus, which is a sixth dimensional planet in the book, they can travel from place to place by adjusting their vibration to the vibration of the place they want to go to. We can't do that yet. I mean, some people do have out-of-body experiences, but we're not usually in control of them. We just realize we've had one. But a fifth dimensional being, say they're on Venus and they want to visit the Akashic records, they activate their Merkaba, which is a star tetrahedron, which is around all of us, even those of us in the third dimension. It's two pyramids, one facing up, one facing down, intersecting, and the top pyramid, the masculine, spinning in a clockwise direction, and the bottom pyramid spinning in a counterclockwise direction. So they're these counter-rotating fields, when activated, allow the light being to travel anywhere in any galaxy instantly. So they can go to visit the Akashic Records in the rings of Saturn and be there instantly. We can't do that yet. Fourth dimensional beings begin to remember the future as well as the past, because if there is no time and everything is happening at once, why can't you remember the future? Why is it you can only remember the past? Only those of us who are constrained by time think we can't remember the future. So with each dimension upward, we have more and more abilities and powers, mental telepathy, intuition. The biggest power we have in the third dimension is our intuition. We know many things through our intuition, and we all should respect it and look to it and listen to it. And that intuition will then develop later into mental telepathy, where you actually don't have to use words to communicate with one another.
Well, I mean, that's fascinating, because a lot of our listeners will probably only really be aware of, the 3 dimensions and the third dimension that we're operating in. But it certainly rings true with myself, who's done some research and theorized about what spirits could be when investigating the paranormal. So, and I kind of did come across the idea that basically spirits are operating outside of the human frequency range. That's what we call
right.
So we call it visible light, but there are a lot more frequencies that we can't tune into, and that's where these spirits are operating. So that's been the focus of my investigations and research, building experiments and trying to get to grips with how I can contact these beings.
Are you talking about like spirits as different from ghosts?
Yeah. So to us, so to myself and Ben, there is a difference. So a ghost is what we would call a memory or a residual energy, and it's almost like a tape recording. And it's so if a ghost walks through a wall, or if it seems to be floating above the ground, it's because that wall wasn't there when they were alive, or the ground was higher when they were alive, and all you're seeing is a built-up energy that's playing over and over again. Whereas a spirit is more of an intelligent collection of consciousness, and it's basically a consciousness without a body, and therefore allowed to operate on different frequencies because it doesn't have the restraints of the human biological vessel, which keeps you restrained in within a 5-sense reality, basically.
Right. That's my understanding too. Thank you for explaining that so clearly.
It's great to hear that other people are kind of coming to the same conclusions that we are. Sometimes you can get a little bit lost and you kind of think, am I on the right path? And then you come across other people who think the same, and it kind of makes you think that you are doing the right thing. Okay, so I guess if you think like consciousness, we've come to this planet for a reason. Do we have a true purpose? So when people talk about the meaning of life, why are we here? Like you asked your teacher back at school, why are we here? What is the point? If you could just sum that up, I guess, what would you say is the point of us being here right now?
I think that the job of us in the third dimension is to learn about love. Our overarching job as spirits is to evolve back to divine consciousness so that we can always rest in the blissful, ecstatic state of divine orgasm in which the universe has always dwelt and will always dwell. But the task in the third dimension is to learn about love, is to get onto the path of light and to see love in every being, in every tree, in every baby, in every kitten, and in every elephant, in every human, and not to judge one another, but to realize that we're all here for the same purpose, to remember that we are divine and to learn about love in all of its facets.
I think what you've done there, Susan, is you've given us a great ending. I think no more really needs to be said after that.
Was pretty brilliant, to be fair.
I think that's a great message to our listeners and to anyone, of course, in the world. I mean, it's, to be honest, that's how I try to live my life, and I know that's how a lot of people try to live their lives. Unfortunately, there are a lot of temptations in the world. There is a lot of darkness that still exists in the world, and I guess we've got to
shine your light brighter. That's all.
That's it. Thank you, Susan. I mean, if you want to, do you want to tell us where people can get your books and where people can contact you? Should they wish to talk to you?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for asking that. They can contact me through my website, susanplunket.com, and Plunkett has one T, susanplunket.com. Or they can get the book on Amazon, or I think barnesandnoble.com. And in New York City, which they're probably not hearing this, but it's West Sider Books on Broadway. But I love talking to you guys. Thank you so much for having me. If you're interested in this stuff, listeners, hello. Big love out to all of you. Take a look at Mission from Venus. It might spark something in you. Maybe you're a wanderer. Okay, bye.
Perfect.
Thank you, Susan.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Speak to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so there was our interview with Susan. Very interesting topic, I found.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was something that at the start I was thinking, well, where's this going to go? What are we going to get from this? But it certainly opened itself up, and the discussion about dimensional beings and how that sits with our own theories and our own research, and that really struck a chord there.
Yeah, I mean, it ended up making more sense than what I expected it to.
Yeah.
In the long run.
Yeah. I mean, as I briefly touched on with Susan there, I mean, something I've been toying with lately is how, these things operate on different frequencies, and why can't we I guess interact with them? And the reason is, I believe, that the consciousness that inhabits our body is exactly the same consciousness that is a spirit, but a spirit isn't constrained within a biological vessel, the human body.
Yeah.
And the human body prevents the consciousness from reaching its true potential, and it keeps you trapped within a 5-sense reality, and as Susan would call it, the third dimension. Once this consciousness breaks free of the body, basically you die, or the body dies, the consciousness is free to travel where it wants. Yeah. It can now operate on multiple frequencies, and I believe that that's what spirits are, and that's what spirits are doing. So it's a very interesting concept that certainly fits in with my theories.
Yeah, I mean, what I found very interesting was the whole dark versus light sort of thing. And again, that's been something that's been around for thousands of years, all in different cultures. I mean, you've only got to look at, in the Indian culture, I think it's the Hindu religion, forgive me if I'm wrong, but they have like a god of destruction and a god of creation. That's like your dark and your light.
Dark and your light,
there.
yeah. I mean, ancient cultures have, order and chaos. And, and it's something
exactly.
I think that was the Egyptians, and out of chaos comes order. And that was, when the Nile flooded and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a similar, we talk of dark beings and light beings, and that echoes throughout ancient cultures throughout history. So I think that they've, some people might not see it how Susan sees it. Some people might see it slightly differently or have a slightly different theory, but ultimately it comes back to the same, I guess the same central point, really.
Yeah, and I think more and more people are starting to come around to the idea of like this multi-dimensional plane. And you've got to look at things like comic books, for example.
Yeah.
Comic books have been saying it for years, where there's like multiverses.
Yeah.
And the thing is, because that's so popular now, people are going, oh yeah, actually,
that could.
I can see that being a theory.
Yeah.
And people are switching onto it.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, I think there are multiple dimensions. I think. I mean, I always describe it as a block of flats, and we're operating on one floor. And
Yeah,
I
so
believe
we're on
that,
floor 3, and then there's someone on floor 7.
spirits are on
floor...
7, and
Yeah.
and I don't know, aliens are on floor 6, and
but we just can't
we
get
can't
to those
interact
floors.
with each other because we're on different floors.
It's like every now and again you might pass one in the hallway.
Yeah, and you hear them.
And that's what...
You hear them because they're moving the furniture around, they're playing the music too loud again. So you know they're there, you know, and as Ben says, you might pass them briefly in the lifts or down a corridor, but ultimately you're living on different floors, and you can't interact with each other. And I think that's what's happening here. Yeah, interesting.
I also found it really interesting that she was saying people like Tesla and Roosevelt and Jesus are all like these kind of wanderers
who
were sent here for this purpose to make things better.
Yeah, but then I do wonder if there are, I don't know what the opposite to a wanderer would be, but if there are people that are sent from the dark to
stop them. And
it reminds me a bit of Constantine, if anyone's seen the film. I haven't seen the series, but I've seen the film with Keanu Reeves, where he's basically, his job is to control the battle between... It's
between demons,
God and the devil.
Yeah.
To prevent the darkness from taking over, but it's also to prevent the light from taking over, and to basically restore balance. There has to be a healthy balance.
Yeah, it's really weird you mentioned Keanu Reeves then, because the film I had in my head was The Matrix.
Okay.
Where you've got the people that are free from the Matrix and the agents that are trying to stop them.
Yeah. And again, it's the same, isn't it? So it's a different story.
Yeah, different story, but the same concept.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I guess we'll leave it there. Yeah. Thank you to the guys that tuned in and watched our vodcast, whatever the name is.
We'll stick with vodcast.
Vodcast, okay. It did really well, actually. It gained us some more subscribers on YouTube. It gained us some more listens. There were a few people talking about it. We got a couple of comments, and it was great. So obviously you guys enjoyed looking at us more than we thought you would do. Which means we're probably going to do that again. I know we've got an episode lined up next. Not sure who it's going to be yet. It's between two people. But I think the one after that, I think so, episode 11 will be.
I think, by then.
We will do another podcast.
Yeah.
And we will discuss the rest of our experiences. Because we had a big list of stuff
and we didn't get
we didn't get to do. Now, also, for anyone that's interested, we are starting to do, now it's getting really into the depths of winter, we're starting to do some more paranormal investigations. We're going to be going to some outside places, some cemeteries, some, your typical cliched abandoned building type places. And we're going to be filming them, and we're going to be putting them on our Paranormal Paradigm YouTube channel. So there'll be half-hour, 45-minute episodes, basically, of us just wandering around in the dark, investigating, and I think it would be really good if you guys could tune in and watch us and see how we do, and if you've got any tips for us, or if you maybe see something in the video that we haven't, let us know. But that's just something else that you guys can look forward to. I know we are. And our first one we will be doing this Friday, so we'd have done it by the time this show was aired, but we're going to a cemetery and we're going to do some filming, and hopefully we have some good stuff that we can put on YouTube for you guys to tune into. Yeah. And that's it. I guess that just remains for us to say thank you again.
Yeah, thanks to everyone for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next time.
Thank you. Goodbye.